Yes, we managed to get round to it in the end, and that's only in thanks to this game still being relatively unplayable due to constant DRM, which still seems to be in full effect. Well, at least for me anyway. So apologies if I seem a little biased towards this one, but you have to understand that this game really didn't want me covering it. Which is strange considering that this isn't even my least favourite in the series. But in remembering that I made an apology video not too long ago about how this game managed to fuck up my plans on covering it, I want to make it clear right here and now that this video will not cover what I talked about in that, and will instead focus on the PC version alone. And possibly the Xbox version, the PS3 version, and some other versions that share similarities, but certainly isn't the Wii version, or the handheld version, or any other pointless version where the game was totally different for the hell of it. Prince of Persia Forgotten Sands takes place between Sands of Time and Warrior Within. So forget everything you know about Warrior Within and Two Thrones because they haven't happened yet, and also, considering the way that Sands of Time ended, that game also didn't happen. The prince managed to revert time at the end of Sands, and the only thing that happened was that the fortress wasn't attacked, and the enemy Vizier got cut up a bit. However, the prince had learned a lot about the power of the Sands, and that they're not exactly a free t-shirt, and shouldn't be dished out on a whim. Stop me at any point if this sounds familiar. The plot begins with an attack on a fortress where one of your family members is leading the charge, or defense, I can't quite remember. However, after you break in, you learn that this place holds a powerful secret. You find out that this ancient power also comes with the power of the sands, as sand monsters now roam the place. It is now up to you to reseal this power before the world gets eaten up by the sands. And no, I'm not talking about Sands of Time. Well, it seems like I'm breaking into this rant early, but fuck it. Did anyone else think that the plot was basically a rehashed version of Sands of Time? Forgotten Sands is to Prince of Persia what The Force Awakens is to Star Wars. It's the same story all over again, but with a bit of extra makeup. Your brother wants to harness the power of King Solomon's army, but as it turns out, there's a naughty boy held inside in the form of a dark djinn called Rashad, and after being let out, Rashad wants to turn everyone into sand because. However, you are not alone here, because thanks to you wandering into a weird place and drinking some water, you gain— oh for fuck's sake! Look, I'm not trying to make the story sound like Sands of Time, but there's just so much rehashed materials here. Remember those health upgrades from Sands? Well, unlike in that, where that never gets explained, here we find out that this is presumably the realm of a water djinn who contracts you to undo what Malik, your brother, has done. Along with her help, you are given a special power that lets you rewind time by harnessing sand clusters from dead enemies and breakable objects in case you screw things up. After all, this is part of the Sands of Time series, and despite Rashad's sands not technically being associated with the Sands of Time, they might as well be the Sands of Time. After all, they had to shovel it in somewhere. The rest of the game is what you'd expect from a Prince of Persia title. You got your acrobatics and environmental puzzles, which works well, though hasn't really been improved upon in any noticeable way. While on the other hand, you've still got your combat with several of the better known moves, such as vaulting over your enemy, still being there. You can also sort of do a stun attack where you break an enemy's defense so that you can attack them, which isn't a bad thought mind you, but it's not a game changer either. Having said that, I was a little disappointed that the ability to use dropped weapons had been removed from here. I can't remember if it was present in Two Thrones, but I certainly remember it being in Warrior Within, and I personally felt that that was a really cool little addition, which seems to have been omitted from future titles, much to my disappointment. But let's give this game some credit, shall we? I thought that some of the new powers you get in this game were really cool. Your time powers have been taken to a new level of sorts here, in which stopping time will allow you to traverse seemingly untraversable paths. For example, stopping time will allow you to freeze water in place, which you can then grab a hold of and swing yourself to another area. And though this looks ridiculous and would never work in real life, but then again, so does stopping time altogether, this does still look really cool and hasn't been done that many times before in other games. You also get other djinn upgrades and power-ups such as ice attacks, flame attacks, and the ability to give yourself stone armor which can help in battle. They're more there to offer assistance than anything else, but I find that most of encounters could be dealt with without the need to use them. Veterans of this franchise shouldn't have any problems with it, and will most likely not rely on these abilities, but they're there to help you out if you need them. But while this game was okay, and if you loved Sands of Time and wanted a Sands of Time rip-off, then you're gonna love this title. I did, however, find that this game did rip off Sands of Time a bit too much. But before any of you out there... who am I kidding? You've already posted the comment. Let me just show you some evidence for what I mean. What I'd like to do is to show you some scenes from Sands of Time, and then show you some scenes from Forgotten Sands, and see if they look similar in any way. When I first heard about this game coming out, alarm bells immediately went off in my head. I was hopeful for the 2008 release because it said it was done with Sands of Time and wanted to brave new grounds. I still think to this day that that was the best approach to take. Sands of Time was awesome, Warrior Within was awesome, and Two Thrones was pretty good, though not awesome. But I liked how Two Thrones ended. It wrapped it up nicely and didn't leave us gasping for more or leaving us with any unanswered questions. It put it to bed, and that's where it should have been left. Rehashing it further would run the risk of soiling the franchise, and so a new title that was unconnected to the Sands of Time trilogy was probably the best move Ubisoft could make. Unfortunately, I felt that the 2008 title was utter shite, though that's only how I feel, but like I said, it was still the best attitude to take towards the series. But when Forgotten Sands was announced alongside that god-awful Disney movie, I immediately began to get reservations about it. I was immediately under the impression that following on from the 2008 game's reception, Ubisoft wanted to go back and capitalise on Sands of Time's success by hashing it out some more. It's like they were saying, well, Sands of Time was successful, so let's just make that game again. But at the time, those were just my thoughts at the back of my mind. It hadn't come out at this point, and I decided to tell myself to go do myself, because it'd probably come out really well, but nope, it was a Sands of Time ripoff! My fears were confirmed, and the end experience was... while the game wasn't bad at all, it certainly had some good moments, it did feel, however, like it was trying to take a step in the wrong direction and nestle its face in the 2003 game's chest because it's safe and snug there, rather than trying to brave new grounds and be its own thing. Sands of Time was its own thing and was well received because of it. Warrior Within took what Sands did right, but went to new places in order to be its own thing, and was awesome because of it. Two Thrones didn't really know which of its two parents it should live with, and came out not as good as either. Prince of Persia 2008 didn't want to get a job, left home, fell in with the wrong crowd and ended up going into rehab, which is still different, it's just that it didn't turn out well. But in comparison, Forgotten Sands kicked down Sands of Time's door and yelled out, "Honey, I'm home!" It's not a complete rip-off, mind you, there are some major differences. But if I had to describe it, I'd say that it felt like this was supposed to be what Sands of Time started out as. It feels like an expanded version of Sands, with more of what's happening around you being explained, while having access to more time and elemental related powers. But if that's the case, then why didn't Ubisoft just go ahead and call this one Sands of Time Remastered? Because that's what it is. Just change a few of the details and you've essentially got a remastered version of Sands. Sands was great, I'm not here to argue that at all, and had no other Prince of Persia title came out before 2003, then I'd probably be here right now saying that Forgotten Sands was awesome and you should all go totally play it. However, I'm not. I'm not going to sit here and tell you all to play it, because we've already experienced everything that this game has to offer in all of its previous installments, and the minor changes it does make aren't worth seeing, if I'm honest. If you've never played any of the Prince of Persia games before and are thinking about playing this one, then my recommendation is to just not bother and go play Sands of Time instead. Yes, it's an older game, but it's aged pretty well, and the story and atmosphere are still really good. Much better than Forgotten Sands, in fact. The only thing that Forgotten Sands has on Sands of Time is that this game has better graphics and slightly more power-ups. But that's it, and honestly, I don't think that sacrificing the story and atmosphere for more power-ups and better graphics is a good deal. I'm one of those gamers who really doesn't care about what a game looks like, providing of course that I have fun with it, and that what I'm playing is both engaging and fresh. Sands of Time still manages to be engaging and fresh to this day, and is tons of fun. But in comparison, Forgotten Sands is not that engaging and is pretty stale, while the combat kind of feels samey, which waters down the fun. Sands and Warrior Within were both powerhouse titles and are still loved to this day. I'd even go so far as to say that Two Thrones did a really good job as well, though you already know how I feel about that one. But the franchise kind of went downhill from there and has never really recovered. Forgotten Sands didn't manage to bring that magic back to us, and Ubisoft decided to drop the franchise entirely after their new pet project, named Assassin's Creed, took off. Essentially, Assassin's Creed is the spiritual successor to Prince of Persia, as the first few games took a lot of what worked from the Sands of Time trilogy and applied it to an open world map, and was well received because of it. But because this new franchise was quickly gaining new grounds and making Ubisoft a lot of money, there was no reason for them to then go back and breathe new life into Prince of Persia. Forgotten Sands didn't kill the franchise, I want to make that abundantly clear. That process had begun a while before that game came out. But it must be said that Forgotten Sands was the final nail in the coffin. You can tell just by looking at it that it was meant to re-invoke some of that Sands nostalgia that we remember back from 2003, but it failed to do so. There is still a big Prince of Persia fan community out there, and I know for one that I'm part of it, but it is for that reason alone that it pains me to say this now. Prince of Persia Forgotten Sands was the last we'll ever see of this franchise, and it didn't end on a bang either. Instead, Prince of Persia died a very unremarkable and quiet death. In conclusion, fuck it, you don't need my permission to play this game if you really want to. It's an okay play. The combat is alright, some of the puzzles are pretty fun, and it certainly looks pretty. But on the other hand, the story is naff, the characters are uninteresting, and it's trying too hard to be like Sans. If you haven't played this game, then my recommendation would be to skip it entirely and play the Sands of Time trilogy instead. You'll enjoy yourself far more there. While if you have played this game and still love it, then that's awesome, but you have to admit that it's not the best in the series. It's not the worst, I'll agree to that, but I still cannot understand how a game that tried its hardest to be like one of the previous titles managed to miss the mark by a considerable amount. Though I play a lot of games and many of them are brand new titles, I still think that some of the best we have ever seen were from older generations. Back then, the competition between developing companies was make good games and they will come. Nowadays, it's all about raping the advertising budget and getting the public's attention, rather than making something worth playing. It's like the attitude today is that games aren't made to be good, they're made to be sold. In a sense, Forgotten Sands reminds me of the games industry as a whole. What we have now is okay, but what we had before was better.
Sometimes I think this life is killing me.